Good evening, everyone. It's my pleasure to do the presentation of Karl Marsh. But before I start, I was looking around my basement the other day and looking for something on my father, and I found this ticket. 1975 World Series, sixth game, the game that Fisk hit the home run, arguably the best game in World Series history, and Karl and I were there together. And I'm just going to tell you, start off my speech by telling you, everybody knows that Karl was a great athlete, but I'm going to talk to you about the character of the man. We were there, and he was my principal, and so he took his buddy to Boston. I got the tickets, of course. So he knew who he was taking. And it rained for 3 days, the only time in World Series history that was canceled 3 days in a row. He was worrying about his job and my job. I wasn't worrying at all. And we had Frank Ongo, and anybody knows Frank, God bless his soul, but you didn't want to run around in Frank. But anyhow, the sixth game was over, and I won't tell you, like I could tell you like some stories that are unreal. We were stuck in Boston. I couldn't get back to where we were supposed to be. But anyhow, we had no ticket for the seventh game. And so we were going though. So Frank calls from downtown Boston, or Karl calls Frank, or I think Marley was doing the calling. I don't think he had the guts. But anyhow, no cell phones then. I don't know how we were doing it, but anyway, it was crazy. But anyhow, so we had no tickets. So Vince Meechan, we met Vince Meechan, was right in front of the Cape Breton Post. Do you remember him way back when? And he happened to be there, and he was there with Dick Beddoes and all the boys, and they were covering the series. And so, I'll get you a ticket, come down to the hotel. So we came down to the hotel the next, but prior to that, during the sixth game and all the way up, he loved Pete Rose, he loved Johnny Bench. But you wouldn't believe what he was saying about Joe Morgan. He hated Joe Morgan. Joe Morgan this, Joe Morgan that. And I can't even say some of the profane words he was saying about Joe Morgan. So anyhow, we get off the trolley, we go down to the hotel, and sure enough, outside is Vince Meechan. We're getting our tickets. Wicked. By the way, this ticket cost $7.50. We paid $25. But so anyhow, we go over to get our ticket, and who's next to? This is an amazing story. Who's next to Vince Meechan but Joe Morgan? Well, I couldn't get my hand out of my pocket. This guy had him, shook his hand, almost tore his hand off, gave him a big hug, and I think he was teaching him footwork around the bag. Anyhow, I'm going to try to be brief, but it's hard to be brief when you're trying to do something like Karl. If I digress, you're in trouble. Karl Marsh, a Cape Breton Hall of Famer, was born June 15, 1936, to Tom and Catherine Marsh. Karl has two sisters, Stella and Eileen, and two brothers, Jerry and Bill. Bill, who was called Bull, is a member of this Hall of Fame's induction. He was inducted at our first induction 2 years ago. Karl grew up on 10th Street. 10th Street is right, Karl, is it? Yeah. In New Waterford, and like most of the other neighborhood kids, he lived to play sports. His role model was his older brother, Bull, who was a star baseball and hockey player. The Strand Gymnasium was the focal point for Karl and his buddies. He watched and learned from the senior strands in baseball, basketball, and hockey. Karl also played in numerous house leagues at the Strand organized by the legendary Jack McKenzie. Karl played all sports growing up: rugby, hockey, baseball, and basketball. In baseball, he became one of the finest second basemen in the province. Together with Mike Roberts, they formed the finest double play combination in the Maritimes. Karl was a slick fielder with great hands and good quickness. As a hitter, Karl, who batted left-handed, was one of the leading hitters on the island during his era. He was a line drive hitter who could get on base and also drive in runs. He was at his best with 2 strikes on him. Karl looked like a ball player. He really did look like a ball player, stylish. He had the crease in the hat, if you guys can remember back, he had that little crease in the hat, and had a fancy warm-up jacket on all the time. His spikes were shined like you wouldn't believe, and he had those flip-down sunglasses, so I was paying attention. Karl was a member of the famous 1959 Giants that won the Maritime title against Woodstock in what ranks up there as the best sports series ever played in this town. And as you all know, there were many in New Waterford's proud sport history. As a 10-year-old kid, that was my first memory of Karl. We were let out of school, and along with the other 5,000 people, I watched history unfold from my vantage point along the first baseline. I didn't have a seat, everybody was standing. Other than the huge crowd and the celebration after the final out, all I remember about the game were the two sensational catches made by Karl in the late innings of the 15-inning nail-biter. 15 innings. One was a huge leap to snag a line drive. I can still remember thinking to myself, my God, can this guy ever jump? It wasn't until I got older and saw Karl play basketball that I realized that he wasn't a very good jumper. I don't think jumping is in the Marsh gene pool. In fact, I'm sure of it. But on that day, it must have been divine intervention because Karl's vertical jump and timing were on display. That catch only set up the stage for his amazing over-the-shoulder catch in shallow right field in the 15th inning to save the game. I have to get off of Karl for a minute and talk about one amazing performance. Dale Carney was pitching a no-hitter into the 10th inning. The first run was scored was unearned. They hadn't got a hit. He went to pitch an extra 6 innings, inducing many ground balls, 8 of which Karl and Mike converted into double plays. Can you imagine 8 double plays in one game? Dale's pitching performance that October day has to rank as one of the greatest individual performances ever by a New Waterford athlete. The Giants were the first team to win a maritime title, quite a feat, at being from New Waterford, the first team from New Waterford to win a maritime title. The team is in the New Waterford and Cape Breton Sports Hall of Fame, and more recently they were inducted into the Maritime Sports Hall of Fame, a great honor for our boys of summer. My buddies and I used to try and emulate these guys. They were our heroes. I can remember going down to the field at the coal chute there, that grass across from Jones, that was our field. And we'd have infield practice. Harry Steele would try to be Bozo at third. He really had to try. Gary would be Mike at shortstop, and I would be Karl at second. And we couldn't find, I don't remember who played Dan Willie, because really, whoever was playing Dan Willie didn't have to do much, right? And you probably would have realized that if they'd watched Dan Willie field pop flies, they were really didn't want to play first base. But you know, if we had all watched Dan Willie hit, we would have learned a lot, because he's probably the best hitter in the league for a period of 2 or 3 years there. And Spike, nobody wanted to play you, buddy. I guess there was no left-handers around. 1959 was a big year for Karl, as it was the year he married the love of his life, Marilyn McDonald. Together they raised 3 wonderful children, Bruce, Susan, and Carla. Karl also excelled in basketball, a flashy ball handler, great shooter and scorer. He was an offensive leader in all the teams he played on. He was just as good on the defensive end, tenacious with an aggressive approach to defense. He didn't want Karl guarding you. He ruined many a guy's night in the gym. And when I come home from St. Vex and I play against these guys in the scrimmages, this guy'd be on top of me. It was just gross. And he was dirty, too. Karl played at Mount Carmel High, Central High, Xavier College, St. Vex University, and finished his career with the famed and sometimes infamous New Waterford Strands, winners of numerous Nova Scotia maritime titles. So what word describes Karl Marsh best? Well, the first word that comes to my mind is winner. You know, people say, well, he was on numerous championship teams. This guy was on numerous championship teams. Well, I'm going to list the championship teams that Karl was on, just to make my point. Central High School basketball, Nova Scotia champs. New Waterford Giants, 1959, Nova Scotia and Maritime champs. That's 2 championships, because you have to win two championships. New Waterford Comets, softball, Nova Scotia and Maritime champs. St. Vex University basketball. He played with a pile of U.S. imports. Him and Freddie Mills were, I think there's another guy with them, but were the only locals. So they won 2 Nova Scotia University titles, 2 Maritime University titles, 1 Nova Scotia senior title, and 1 Canadian senior title. And when he came to play with the Strands of New Waterford, the modern day Strands as they call them, they won 9 Nova Scotia titles and 7 Maritime titles. Anybody out there counting? 27 he won an amazing he was on 27 championship teams. Do you still think he might be a winner? It gets better because Karl ranks as one of the town's most prominent sports builders, and we've had many. Karl was the coach of one of the teams we're honoring here tonight, the powerful, and I mean powerful, Mount Carmel Mounties. Did you like that art? Joanne? Yeah, that's a little St. Agnes Mount Carmel thing there, right? Karl also coached, along with Bernie McKinnon, the 1970 Sydney Steel Kings to the Nova Scotia title and bronze medal at the Nationals in Quebec. I was the third man in on that team. I was an assistant. I guess they wanted somebody to carry the bats. But anyhow, these guys, Dave McLean, Billy McNeil, Bobby Gillis, they loved Karl. And so, y'all know Karl's quite a motivator. So they were down and we were trying to win. You're always trying to win the whole tournament, but we were going for the bronze medal game, and Karl's trying to get these guys going. He says, you guys, we're at the hotel before we're going to the game, you guys win this thing, I'll jump in that pool with my three-piece suit on, I'll swim underground from one end to the other. So guess what? They won. We came back to the hotel. This is crazy. We came back to the hotel, he has a few pops, goes in, puts his three-piece suit on, shoes and all, hops off the diving board, swims underground, underwater to the other end. These guys were going nuts. Karl was also coaching the Waterford Midgets to the Nova Scotia baseball title in 1972, and he was also head coach for the Waterford Strands, winners of the Maritime Senior Basketball Championship in a series that was played at Mount Carmel Gym on Easter Sunday in 1970. And Marshall Laveau was here. He was the assistant coach, and he's the coach of the other 16 championship team. Stand up for a minute. Marshall will be recognized. One of our greatest athletes of all time. There he is, look, fit as a fiddle. Many consider that the finest basketball game ever played in this town. So as you can see, winning follows Karl. But to me, Karl was more than a winner. To my buddies and me, he was the man. Karl started us in basketball when we were at grade 7 at the Strand Gym. Incidentally, the core of that crew went on to win 2 high school championships in basketball and a soccer championships several years later. Unfortunately for us, Karl left to take a teaching position in Quebec, and didn't get to guide us through high school. I can still remember the day he came into the gym at Mount Carmel to tell us he was leaving. We were devastated, I mean devastated. Karl, along with Sonny Lever, formed a midget baseball league in town. I can still remember Karl and Sonny walking along the tracks from the field with a huge gear bag, heading home from our practice. Of course, Sonny was always carrying the bag. Karl, what's all that about? And you know how heavy those bags were. Karl sent 17 of us to basketball camp at Acadia. 15 Catholics and 2 Protestants. Duncan, we even took a couple of your buddies. And I think some of the guys were here Freddie was with us, Gay was with us, I think Jerry was with us, Collins was with us, and Raymond was with us. So Karl also introduced us to weightlifting, when common theory at the time was that you shouldn't do that because you would become muscle bound. Well, today we know that weight training is so crucial to athletic development in the modern day. I can still hear Karl preaching, from strength comes quickness. So I was listening, Karl, but I never bought that, did I? Just look at me. Karl was really ahead of his time as an organizer and a coach. To me, he was even more than that. He was inspirational. I could listen to him talk forever, and he still can talk. He was a tremendous motivator. He could get you to believe and do things you didn't think you could do that were possible. And was he animated? Really animated, but I guess I shouldn't talk about that. I remember as a grade 8 student watching the Mount Carmel players here tonight play on our infamous dirt soccer field. What a home field advantage, eh? I remember vividly Karl shouting out words of encouragement, like, "You ox," or "You meathead." Really too funny. But as we all know, these guys here tonight would have run through a brick wall for Karl, and they'll attest to that. Karl, you have been an inspiration to all of us. You have such an impressive resume, and yet you never talk about yourself. It's always about the teams and the town. And there's no one who champions the Waterford natives, alive or deceased, as much as you do. Whether it's our musicians, our artists, or sports figures, you have a captivating way. Uh-oh, we're in trouble here, buddy. Oh my God, I saw this happen to somebody else. It's not here. Anyhow, we're going to ad lib now. You have a captivating way of talking about our town's bests, and you never talk about yourself. And just look at all your artwork that's here. So, Karl, it's been a privilege for me to do this presentation, knowing you for all the years that I have, and I'll ask Darlene Kelly to go up to present you with your plaque. Congratulations, Karl.
Want to say a few words? Want to say a few words? A few.
He said F-E-W, few.
I guess it's one of the few times I'm speechless. I don't know really what to say. You'll have to excuse me. But the Strand Gym in the Waterford should still be here. It's where I got my start as having fun, along with all the other guys in my neighborhood. The most important thing, and I got to say that got me started, was my wonderful family. My father, Thomas Marsh, known as Tom, came from Lingan, left school in grade 6 to go work in the mines with his 4 brothers, continued on and worked his way up and became a stationary engineer, was one of the best Scottish or Irish fiddlers, had his own orchestra, the Five Aces, of which Margaret DeVoe, Margaret McKinnon's uncle, Gussie McKinnon, played with him. They had 2 violins that played in harmony. They played on the old radio from CJCB, and they got letters from as far away as Ireland, Scotland. He was a gentleman. And he was my hero. Lowell mentioned my 2 brothers, Jerry and Billy, my 2 sisters, Eileen, Stella. Fantastic. In our household, where music and sports and education was prominent. I lived in a great neighborhood, and we had neighborhoods at that time, and we lived right over here, and our neighborhood was 10th Street. It went from King Street over to 8th Street and bordered on Plummer Avenue and County Road. And in that neighborhood, we had singers and dancers and athletes and boxers and fiddle players and piano players, and we even had some people who all kinds of them, politicians even. And the town was made up of neighborhoods. And as they said, as I get going, I could talk all day, but there was no television, there was no computers, there were no iPhones, and not everybody, I don't think, had a radio. And we were outside all the time. and we were encouraged to take part in athletic activities. And when we left in the morning and went, the only time we came back home was if we got hungry, it got dark. And each of the neighborhoods were the same. And it was a time in my life, I didn't realize it, but the Strand Gym, we didn't have any rink, only the outdoor ones. And Jack McKenzie, the first great guy that I was exposed to. And I can't say all the guys like Foxy Cheston and Marshall Laveau, my brother Billy, all those, there's all kinds of them that they coached us and helped us and kept us on the way. But the first thing was, and the most important, was family. The next was neighborhood. The next was the time period that I had a chance to grow up in. Because I was born in 1936, and that was only 14 years before or after the town was incorporated. And Joe Pounder and Freddie Connors and Leo Fay and Charlie Pyle, and I want to give a little Charlie Pyle's sister Marguerite's here from Winnipeg, and one of the greatest athletes ever came out of I'm supposed to give a little talk about Pounder afterward, and you know, I grew up in the great hockey players like Leo Fay and Melvin Gadd and Pounder and Brother Billy and those guys. And Pounder was called Pounder because he could shoot the puck hard. And in those days, there was only one-piece sticks. Can you imagine now? You left them out outside in the rain and everything, and you could bend them. They weighed half a ton, but you could never break them. And Pounder there was called that because there was no slap shots in those days, and they played on the Pushies rink and the Hawks rink because there was no artificial ice. And he was named Pounder because of his hard shot. And then years later, a fellow like Bruce Campbell comes along, and his snapshot, Bruce's would break the boards. He had such a great snap shot. But Pounder was the first. And they played on the outdoor rinks. And in 45, like I said, when they won the Canadian Championship, they beat Sydney Millionaires out 91 minutes of overtime, and won the Cape Breton Championship, first Cape Breton Championship. And they went and played against Pictou, who had all imports, and they had the McGibbon brothers, and one of them was Tick Williams, one of the great players for the Toronto Maple Leafs. And these guys, like Mike Campbell, I think Mike saw that series, eh? And Mike always said if Waterford had another period that he thinks we could have taken them. I don't want to keep going on and on. I want to count, like I said, my family first, my people I grew up with, my coaches. I can't say enough for all of my coaches, and I can't name them right now. And the time period and the great opportunity I had. Lowell talked about all the championships, but you don't win championships by yourself if you're a team guy. If you play as a team, and there's a lot of guys here in this room here now that I played with and grew up with, and you're talking Jimmy Nemes and his brother Malky and Mike Roberts, and Dan Willie McKinnon and Spikey, those guys. You don't win championship unless you play with great guys. Not only were they good athletes, but they're great people. Gave back to the community and so on. So I can't take any more. Thank you very much.